Hi, everyone. As people are starting to trickle in here, I thought I'd go ahead and do some housekeeping items. Um, my name is S.K. Doyle. I'm the new Associate Director of Programs and Volunteers at Episcopal Charities, and I'll be kind of running host on the call. So I'll be on the back end monitoring questions and keeping us on schedule. I know this is becoming an increasingly busy time for a lot of us, so we definitely want to respect your time. A few things. So first, you're all muted, and we're just going to keep everybody muted so we can minimize feedback and background noise. But I would encourage you to open the chat function, which you can find at the bottom of your screen if you're on Zoom or on a desktop. And you can enter questions there. I'll be monitoring that and passing those to Patrick and Peter as they come up. Also, something that may be helpful for you is to put your view into speaker view, which you can find at the top right of your screen. So that will show you just one person who's talking at a time. And also just monitor the chat function as we go through. I'll probably be dropping some helpful links as Patrick and Peter are talking, so you'll be able to find those there. And finally, I'll let you all know that we are recording this call, so we can send that out later for your future reference and also get that to some folks who aren't able to join us. So thank you all so much for being here. We're going to get started in about a minute or so.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Peter Keller. I'm president of Episcopal Charities Board. We want to thank you for joining us today on this call, our new way of communication. We're obviously in the midst of a crisis, which is more severe than anything I've seen in my life. And we welcome you to this meeting so that we can give you an update on things that are going on the ground. While the offices of Episcopal Charities are closed, and as you know, the bishop has closed all of our churches at least through Holy Week. Our diocese is posting information on churches that have the ability to live stream so that you can get some spiritual nourishment in this time of crisis. And our presiding Michael Curry is also posting weekly meditations. Patrick Bergquist, our director of programs, has been and is always in contact with all of our programs, and we've heightened that contact over the last couple of weeks as we find so many of our programs in a crisis mode. He's going to share some stories with all of you about programs that are continuing to serve their communities. We've obviously changed our mode of operations in a number of programs to make certain that we manage social distancing and provide important services without compromising the health of any of our volunteers or of our clients. Patrick's also going to share some insights about demand for services, especially our feeding programs, as they try to deal with the increasing needs brought on by this crisis. As you all are aware, over the last couple of weeks, the massive shutdowns of businesses to help stem the spread of the COVID-19 have created significant increases in the ranks of the unemployed. And while many of us in the white collar field are lucky enough to be able to work from home, that's not true for so many people that are hourly workers. And like so many crises in this time of widening income inequality, the burden falls disproportionately on hourly workers for whom food insecurity, even in normal times, can be a challenge. And obviously it becomes more severe in a period like this. We expect the demand for our programs to continue to escalate. And while it was encouraging this morning to see some progress in terms of federal programs, the reality is that the services that we provide, the basic human needs services, will likely be more important than ever in the weeks and months ahead. We're planning aggressively as a board to use some of our resources to provide emergency financial support to programs. And we're going to talk to some partners about how they can help us too. But the reality is we will be there. We recognize we need to be there for our clients in a period like this. And let me turn it over to Patrick, who can give you some on-the-ground intelligence about our programs. Thank you, Patrick.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. And thanks to everyone who's taken a few minutes out of your day to just kind of hear what we're doing and to find ways of engaging with our programs. I'm going to share, in our time together, I want to share just a couple of quick stories that I think will help illustrate the major needs that I'm seeing right now on the ground, and then needs that I see that are going to be coming down to us. Right now, there's so many things we just don't know what the impacts are going to be looking like in the near future. Before I share those two stories, I want to give a little bit of context. Our office has been really aggressive in reaching out to our programs. We've been using phone calls and Google Forms and surveys. If I could figure a way to do like carrier pigeons, I would do that. But what we're trying to do is make sure our programs know that we see them and we're with them. Just like you and I can be feeling really isolated right now, we're not in our normal routines. Our programs are feeling the same kind of isolation. And so there's power in being seen, and hearing someone say, I see you, I hear you, we're with you, you're not alone in this. And so that's been one of our first objectives, is reaching out with care to our program leaders. The second thing I want to share with you is we're just feeling so much anxiety from our programs. Again, just like you and I are feeling this level of anxiety, think about our program directors who have committed their lives in so many ways to caring for a group of people in their community. They see their suffering and they're feeling that suffering deeply, and they're feeling that level of anxiety. So I just want to share that that's kind of the context of the kind of the emotional feel that I'm picking up right now in the multiple conversations that we're having with our programs. Let me share with you two examples, and I'm going to focus our examples today on feeding programs and feeding issues. There's all kinds of other issues we're beginning to identify that we'll be addressing in later calls, from students to working with the undocumented population, those kinds of things that are really being hit hard by this. But I want to focus today on our feeding programs. So one example is a feeding program in the Mid-Hudson region. I was speaking to their program director last week, and they are already seeing a doubling in their demand. They serve they used to serve a hot breakfast and lunch to people, and now, obviously, because of social distancing, they have moved to go boxes for both of those, and they've seen a doubling in demand. That was late last week. We know from the trajectory of these things that demand is going to continue to grow. And so we want to stand with them. One of the issues they're dealing with is they're relying heavily on their staff. Before this, they relied on huge groups of volunteers coming in. And now, because of social distancing and the need to kind of keep people safe, they've cut almost all of their volunteers out. And so they have a small staff and they're trying to do everything with that team. There's going to be burnout very quickly with them. And so finding ways of supplementing that staff with trained and safe volunteers is going to be important. One of the interesting facts I was talking to her about was they've had to shift their budget. Not only is there an increase in food demand, but because they're not washing and drying all of the reusable plates and forks and knives and cups, but having to buy all disposable instead of reusable, their costs have gone up significantly. So just for 1 month in this program, they go through 3,000 to-go containers in 1 month. That wasn't budgeted for. So we want to be able to stand with them. Another large feeding program that we partner with here in Manhattan in the Bronx. I was on a group call and heard about a need for seniors, a seniors feeding program. Last month, they fed about 15,000 meals to seniors. This month, they're barely able to do a fraction of that. And it's chiefly because their sites, the senior centers, the community centers that they were based out of, have closed down. And so they have no place to go. And they don't have that core volunteer team that they can count on to do things safely. So we're in the process of working with them with identifying sites, some of our partner sites, parishes that are willing to open up their parking lot to try to partner with this organization to get meals out to some of those who are just so isolated. Our elderly population feel isolated and afraid. They're not going out, they're not eating well. And so finding ways of doing delivery to them and working with them is really important to us. Just so you know, they have an infrastructure that we don't, and we have an infrastructure that they don't. So they have 9 mobile units that they're ready to engage in the community, and we have some places for that. And so what we're trying to do is find ways of connecting with each other so that we can do the most good wherever we're at. We've also been contacted by parishes who have gotten teams of volunteers who are anxious to get involved and want to do it safely and in an effective way. And so we're able to connect them with programs, food pantries or whatever it is. So we're already working on that with a couple of different parishes. I want to tell you, I just got off the phone a half an hour ago with one of our programs in the Mid-Hudson who's working with our undocumented asylum-seeking population. Last month, they were doing a once-a-month food pantry for between 40 and 50 families. Now, because of the demand, they've increased that to a twice-a-month distribution for about 100 families. When I was talking to their program leaders, they said, Patrick, it's just going to go up. And so they've seen this significant increase in need, and that's what we want to be present for. So I want to share just a couple of things that we're learning and a couple of things that we're doing in response. First, our programs are feeling significant anxiety, just like so many of us in our calls are feeling anxiety. They're feeling it as well. We're seeing a significant increase in demand for our programs, particularly in this conversation with our food programs and our feeding programs. Not just our food pantries, but our meal programs are feeling a really significant pinch right now. Our program partners are relying on staff and key volunteers who are getting worn out and overwhelmed and are just not going to be able to sustain what we know is going to be more of a marathon as opposed to a sprint. Although right now it's felt like a sprint because we're trying to build up and build up and build up, but we have to look at it as a long-term thing. This is a marathon. This is going to be for months. And even when the economy is going again, there is still going to be a domino effect on these programs. It's going to take a long time to get us back to where we were. Feeding programs are our first concern, but there are others that are being traumatized by this. And the support we're offering programs is not only the financial support, but also logistical support, expertise, and connecting healthy, trained volunteers to programs. A couple of things that we're doing before I turn it over to Peter. We are in the process of creating a COVID-19 emergency fund. We have an application set up for it. We're still working out the logistics of it. We're just trying to move this ball down the field. So for our programs who have additional expenses and need, we want to be in communication with them and find out how we can help meet some of those needs. We're recruiting volunteers for our program. SK is going to put up another link here now that leads to a volunteer application. The big thing we're encouraging people to do is to volunteer together in small groups and in pairs. This is a safety issue. We want to have the same people going to the same program, even if it's on a repeating basis, because if one of them is sick, the impact is not as strong as if I have that person connecting with multiple different groups of people. So we're being smart about it. We're following the CDC guidelines. We've created best practices for people, and we're trying to get as much information out as we can. So if you jump on our website, there's a whole section for COVID-19, and we're happy to be in communication with you on anything. Peter?
Yeah, let me leave you with just a couple of comments. Number one, thanks for your time today and thanks for your support. We have a regularly scheduled board meeting next Monday, so we'll be talking about some of our outreach efforts at the full board level. We recognize that our services are more important now than they ever are. Times of crises always create these sorts of demands. So our goal is to make certain we're there. We just finished in the last 5 days, 5 meetings for our spring youth opportunity grant cycle, which is after school programs, summer programs. And we evaluated them more conservatively than normal to make sure we kept some resources available to meet emergency demands. The youth programs are vitally important, but we need to make sure people survive this current crisis. So that's going to be our number one focus. We can do it with support from all of you out there. I encourage you to reach out to Patrick and the team if you've got questions. Also, and offer words of encouragement to programs. I know they felt very much supported, not just by money and our financial support, but by the questions that they've been getting from the staff, the reassurance that while our offices are closed, our staff is still working full-time to meet needs, and we're a resource to answer questions, a resource to connect them with bigger feeding programs like the food bank like Feeding Westchester. We want to work collaboratively with a lot of people. It's going to take an awful lot of hands to make us get through this crisis, but we're committed to doing that. And thank you for your support.
So, Peter, I think before we conclude, we wanted to we'll kind of end our time in just another moment. But if there's questions that are coming up, you can put those in the chat, and Peter and I are happy to stay around for an extra few minutes to help answer some of those questions.
Yes, we do have a couple of questions coming in here. The first one is if you all could talk about when and whether we're planning to have additional Episcopal Charities Zoom calls for updates about COVID relief.
Yes, this is planned to be the first of a regular series of communications. Patrick mentioned the stress that everyone's feeling, and one of the best ways to address stress is to have communication so people are aware of what we're doing or aware of what our programs are doing. So we will update you, and we'll send out updates about when the next call will be. I want you to know that in our last advisory committee meeting, we reminded all of our AC members how important they are as a channel of communications to all of us. And so same thing, give us your feedback. If you've got questions, if you've got programs that are having real issues, let us know, and we'll do our best to reach out and help them. But we're counting on input from all of you out there across what's a very, very large diocese to help us know where there are issues and how we can help.
Thank you. Our next set of questions are related to program referrals and programs that are closing down and then referring their guests to other programs in the near area for grab and go meals and things like that. So if we could talk about perhaps how we might create a network or facilitate communication between programs.
No, that's really important. This whole idea of communication is really critical to us. And so we'll work to create, whether it's a geolocation map of programs that we support that we know are still open, those that are closing. Any program leaders that are closing something down, if they'll be in communication with us, we will work with them to get their people referred to other programs that we know in the area, or we'll work with them to say, hey, when you're ready to open back up, and if you need some help opening back up because your particular volunteer base isn't able to help out, let us know, because we want to stand with you. We're not trying to force people open or close, but we want to be a resource to help our programs. And so the biggest thing I would say is be in communication with us so that we can help be in communication with everyone.
And I mentioned earlier, all of our programs have changed their procedures. Obviously, we're not running choice pantries anymore. It's just not safe. The bishop wants us to continue all of our work, but wants to make certain that we do it in full compliance with all the county and state guidelines. So we've closed choice pantries. We've got sealed bags. To SK's last question, we can have stuff set outside of buildings so that people can drive in and pick it up and go. We're trying to do all we can to minimize any human contact, while at the same time making certain, Patrick mentioned stress in the feeding programs. A lot of kids throughout our diocese depend on school programs. We're lucky in my town, the school is still doing breakfasts and lunches. They're doing them sealed and picking up, and some school districts I know are having school bus drivers deliver meals, but schools are a source of feeding for an awful lot of children at risk, and with the schools closed, that creates a whole new set of needs across our diocese.
Great, a couple more questions here. One is whether it is appropriate to reach out to programs that folks have relationships with or have visited before to offer support of any kind, whether that is welcomed or if that would be getting in the way of their operations. If y'all could talk about that.
I would encourage anyone to reach out. I think a call from a friendly face, asking if they need help, asking if we can give suggestions is really critical. And I mentioned earlier at the outset, we've got some resources. We can't meet in person, but the diocese is posting on the website those churches that have the ability to stream, so that we want to add some element of normalcy to people's lives, and being able to worship on Sundays, even if it's just remotely, is comforting. Having a phone call from somebody at our office or a volunteer to say, keep up the good work. We know this is stressful. is going to go a long way.
Yeah, fully agree. Fully agree. I am seeing, I want to be mindful of time. And so if people need to step out, like that's completely appropriate. But we also want to be able to answer some more questions that are coming through, if that's okay with everybody, or with Peter. Do you have a few minutes to stick around and answer a couple of questions?
Yeah, well, we're happy to answer any questions you all have.
Yeah. SK, do you have other questions you want to bring up to us?
Yeah, I mean, I'll highlight, there's some chat and in the group chat here regarding operating when churches are closed, continuing to operate food pantries. So I would just highlight for everyone that I have dropped a link to our best practices infographic that also links to CDC guidelines and is pretty helpful in terms of operationally how programs can work.
And I want to highlight one thing with that, SK. We were very intentional about reaching out to Canon Paris and Bishop Dici, saying we want to make sure we are in compliance with his wishes of closing down the churches. And he was like, if outreach programs are willing to stay open, we think that's a good thing. They just need to follow all of the CDC guidelines, what's the guidelines that are coming from the state health department, from local health departments. And so we want to be helpful in that. So if you're in that spot or there's a vestry who's like, we got to shut this down, we completely appreciate that and respect that. But if you want to have a conversation of how you might be able to open those up in a safe way, we're happy to be in conversation with you about that.
And if you've got ideas about volunteers, we welcome that. Obviously, a lot of our programs, typical of volunteer organizations, a lot of them tend to be retirees. Obviously, the older cohort is more at risk. So if there are groups that are younger, obviously people that are healthy, that are looking at a time when they may have some time on their hand, unfortunately, we do need help. Our programs do need additional volunteers because some of the new practices, are a little bit more labor intensive. Patrick mentioned we're going from different types of serving implements. So we're always looking for volunteers, and maybe one of the bright spots is when we get through this crisis, we may have a new band of volunteers who've been touched by what we do for people in the community.
Great, and I'll also highlight, there was a question about sharing information and having a sort of shared document or database for keeping track of what people are doing. So I've dropped a link in the chat function here to a Google Doc that we started at Episcopal Charities for folks to share what they're learning and seeing. And also there was a question regarding volunteers and whether Episcopal Charities can still help to send volunteers to programs. So I've also dropped a link to our volunteer application that's under our COVID relief section on the website. And that includes a form for programs to fill out to request volunteers. And we'll start dispatching teams as soon as we're able.
And just to highlight one quick thing on that is the volunteers, what we're really trying to shoot for, yes, we can dispatch volunteers. Volunteers are going to be required to go through a training with us. We'll do a Zoom training that will go through best practices, go through safety procedures, all of those things before we dispatch anyone from Episcopal Charities to any of our programs. I think that's really, really important in trying to follow the guidelines that the bishop has laid out for us to really honor those guidelines. The second thing I will say about this is, we're trying to get groups of people. So if your parish community or a living environment that you're in is willing to get a small group of people together and volunteer together, that's the optimum thing that we're really going to try to work for. Oh, college students. Yes, I just saw that. College students are great. They're home right now.
So I think that looks to me like we've covered the questions here. Again, feel free to reach out to Patrick and myself about program questions and update us on what you all are doing. So I'll turn it over to them to close us out.
So thanks to everyone. We just closed by telling you all to stay healthy, stay safe. The social distancing really is critical in something like this. New York is still in a phase where we're doubling every 3 days. We're at 50,000 people, we'll be at 100,000 people next week. So the key to ending this, the key to minimizing the disruption is real religion about social distancing. use electronics, it's great. We can reach out and talk to each other and see each other. But really do limit your interactions, and that's what we're trying to do with the programs too, so that we can get past this and get back to serving people on a more normal basis. But again, thanks for all of your support, and stay healthy.
Thanks, everyone.